First, I'd like to thank all the YouTubers who got me started, as I always do. Props to them. Please watch them. And today, I want to answer that question. Can an Ender 3 or an FDM printer print resin quality miniatures? And the answer is emphatically no, but don't stop watching, because what I want to show you is what the Ender 3 Pro, which I have, can do. And it's not quite resin quality, but I think it's a high enough quality that if you're not entering your stuff into painting competitions, you'll be pretty thrilled with it. So here's a super close-up of a basilisk I printed before I even had my Ender dialed in technically. And you can see it looks pretty good. But now let's look at it at an effective distance of 2 feet away. And it is sitting next to a beautiful resin printed dwarf. And I don't know about you guys, but honestly, look at it. Can you tell which is resin printed and which is FDM? And this isn't tabletop distance. This is closer than tabletop distance. Now, the next thing I want to show you that I did is also, this was one of my earlier prints before I had my Ender 3 quote-unquote dialed in and even really knew what I was doing. So this is Dinosaur, and again, you're looking at it from closer than tabletop distance. This dinosaur has not been primed. It has not been sanded. It has not even been cleaned up. I need to clean between the fangs and do a little scraping, and the underside needs a little scraping. But with primer and paint, I mean, look at it right now, just raw off my printer with supports removed. It looks pretty good. And from this distance, which again is closer than tabletop, I don't know if you didn't know it was FDM. Looking at it, could you really tell? Again, if you hold it up in your hand an inch away from your eye, or if I move this photo zoomed in, you would be able to tell. But the point of this video is not, can you tell the difference between FDM and resin from an inch away? Or if you went to enter it in a Golden Demon, obviously you couldn't use an FDM print. It's not good enough. When you hold an inch or two away or take a super high-res photo, there's way too many imperfections, and you'll see the layer lines, and you just can't do it, obviously. But you're looking at it right now from effectively, say, 2 feet away, and it looks pretty good. If you paint it, give it a little TLC and some cleanup, and then prime it and paint it, I think most people would be hard-pressed to tell the difference without really closely inspecting the model. So let's now go on to, and again, I'm showing these mostly at in-between tabletop distance and close-up. This one's a little closer to tabletop distance. Is a green slat, again, that I printed up very early on. And what I want you to look at here, look at the pouch on his waist. You can see, even at this distance, very clearly the latch to the strap, whatever you want to call it, closing the pouch. And the pouch is very well defined. And, this is off my Ender 3. And that definition, to me, is pretty incredible once you know what you're doing. And again, when I did this, I didn't even really know what I was doing. So I'm pretty impressed by how this came out. And I'm actually want to spend some more time on this model because, again, since I didn't have my Ender totally dialed in at the time, this next picture is going to show you, and then this is way close up. This is effectively about 8 inches from the model, 8 or 9 inches. So it's very close. Look at the detail. Let's focus on the skull on his right shoulder. And that's on your left for the people who aren't, awake yet or maybe tired watching this. So that skull, the detail is pretty amazing, I think, on that coming off my Ender. Now, where does the Ender struggle? Because I'm not here glorifying the Ender and say it can do everything perfectly, because obviously it can't. Look at the tips of the horn. Where the Ender struggles on figures is very thin, fine tips, horns, fangs, the very edges of weapons if they're sculpted thin. But still, look at all the detail in this figure. And again, this is from way closer than tabletop. It looks pretty good, and that's, again, unpainted. So, and also, by the way, the terrain it's sitting on, that's all printed off my Ender 3 and also just raw off the printer. So here we're looking at Gronk Boom Shot from the Artisan Guild. I love this ogre, and I like to title this picture, Who's Got the Bigger Boomstick? And we all know who that is and who's going to win this fight, because that cannonball coming out is about the size of the dwarf. But anyway, so again, the Ender struggles a little bit. Look at the cloth coming off his head and look at his fangs. But again, you're looking at the effective distance of probably about 6 inches. So you back up from that. And, again, if this was painted and you're backing up from it, it's going to look pretty great. And I think the Ender, considering it does the terrain as well, if you only have one printer, you're just a little further away. This is still too close, effectively. This is only, maybe a foot and a half away. But if you need to do terrain and minis, the Ender is such a no-brainer because the resin printer can't handle. I'm going to show you at the end some of the things that the resin printer can handle, just to give you some perspective. But right now we're talking about figures. So yes, I printed this in resin later, and it came out way better, of course. But this is pretty good. Again, you give a little TLC with some. If you take the time to scrape it, clean it up a little bit, prime it, and paint it nicely, it's going to look pretty great on the table. And the next model we're looking at is also another ogre from Artisan Guild. This one I just threw in here because I think it's funny. I'm stirring the pot, making soup with a goblin inside. And you see the only part of the goblin I painted was the arm after I printed it, because I just thought it was hilarious and I just wanted to see the arm poking out of there. So again, now you're closer to a tabletop distance. You're still closer than tabletop, but getting to a reasonable tabletop distance. And you can see, if I zoomed in on this, it's got a lot of imperfections. The fangs, need a lot of cleanup. There's a lot of areas that could use help on this model. But from this distance, can you see what they are really? I mean, the model just looks pretty good at this distance. And again, unpainted, of course. So now this, unfortunately, I had primed this dwarf. There's a dwarf off Thingiverse, the Dwarf Merchant. So it's already primed. It's not a great picture because I took this picture long ago before I knew I was going to be making a video. But you can see the detail on the pans, the books, the ropes, the pouch there. Look at the leather etching on the edge of the pouch flap on the right side of him. Looks incredible. And now I'm going to show them from the front so you can see the pots, pans, and bottles hanging off the front. But also pay attention, and this is again a pretty close-up picture. Look at those bottles, the swords, the mug. Look at his face. Look at the hook on his nose came out. I mean, the way the character that the artist sculpted in here is not lost on the ender. And again, this is primed, but that's it, primed and just cleaned up a little bit, and it looks pretty good. Now, the reason I couldn't retake pictures, say, why didn't you just take new pictures of it that were a little better, is because I actually started painting this model. Of course, like most of my paint projects, I didn't finish it. I just started base coloring it. So here it is, just with some base coats on some of the stuff. And again, it just highlights actually some of the detail. You see how well the ender printed it out. Now, again, this is way closer than tabletop distance, but you see it next to a resin dwarf, which printed flawlessly. And I think if I paint this dwarf on the left and finish painting the areas I've already painted, because those are just base coated, they're not highlighted or anything or shaded or anything like that. But it already looks almost the same to me. And again, this is effectively only a foot away. So you go 2 feet away or even 3 feet away, and I don't think you'll be able to tell the difference between my resin print on the right and my FDM print off my Ender 3 on the left. So is it resin quality? No, but from 2 feet away, can you tell? That is the big question of this video. I honestly, I love my Photon to death. I love resin printing, but I don't think you can tell. Here's a rat ogre. Now, effectively here, you're about 2 inches away. And this is off the Ender 3, and you still really can't see the layer lines, and I didn't do anything funky with him. I printed him out, peeled the supports off, and then I just hit him with normal primer, not a thick primer or anything weird, just normal GW primer, and then normal GW paints. And what I want to show you, the reason I'm lingering on this picture at this distance, look at he's been stitched together because he's like a Frankenstein creature. Look at his left pec. That's the only pec you can see. You see stitching on it very, very clearly. That tiny little stitch, it's probably like a micron big each stitch, printed out clearly enough on my Ender 3 that I could pick it out and paint it. So I was really, really impressed with what the Ender did here. And now let's look at the back of the model. So on the back of the model, there's more stitching like this. So let's take a look at the back of the model. And well, look at his leg. Look at the rope, the cloth there. It all came out very nice on the Ender. So now at the back, and this is an extreme close-up. Again, this is holding it, an inch from your face. You see all the stitching on his back came out incredible. But if you focus even closer, just to the right of his spine on your picture, you'll see 3 little lines there. That's not a misprint on my Ender. Those are veins that I tried to paint a little bit. And if you look at his right bicep, which is in the right of the photo since we're behind him, he's facing the same direction as us. Don't get confused. So on that right bicep, you also see more veins. Those are not errors from the Ender. Those are not blobs or whatever. Those are veins that I was able to pick out and paint because the Ender printed so finely that those tiny little veins, again, each less than a micron thick, actually printed out. And when I saw this, I said, oh my God, this thing's almost as good as a resin printer. It truly is. You get it dialed in, and you get a nice model from a good artist. And look at the detail here. It's worth lingering on. I think it's pretty incredible. Now let's look at that same rat ogre. Now let's look at it the point of this video is, from a little further away. Now we're looking at it from effectively still only a foot and a half away max. This is not tabletop distance. And I know that he's not base, so it doesn't look as good. But if I just showed you just this picture, and I said to you, which one of these is resin, which one is FDM, I don't think you'd be able to pick it out. And even now that you know, look at it. Do you see any imperfections really on that rat ogre? And again, I didn't do anything special to him except prime him and paint them. I didn't really do any cleanup. There was no real scraping or sanding. I didn't do any of that stuff. So look at this, and I'm thinking, look, if you're only getting one printer, it has to be an Ender 3, not a resin printer, because aside from minis like this, again, I'm going to show you at the end, terrain that a resin printer can't handle, that your FDM printer can. So I won't lie, if you don't have a printer, you don't know how about FDM printing, and here's from true tabletop distance. Again, I would challenge anyone in the world to tell me, what's FDM and what's resin. But talking about the Ender, it is work. It is a hobby unto itself. It takes a lot of time to get your minis to print this well. You have to learn what you're doing, and there will be a lot of failures. I had a lot of failures, so I don't want to mislead anyone who's watching this and think, oh, buy an Ender, just print these figures. There's a learning curve to it. But again, this was pretty early on in my printing process. Again, I think before I truly knew what I was doing, and I'm still getting these kind of results off the Ender, which I think mostly is because you have to, if you build it very carefully, which only takes you an hour to an hour and a half, you get these results. Now here is, again, this is effectively 6 inches away. This is an FDM print of a bugbear from the Artisan Guild, which is part of the Lost Adventures Kickstarter. And I'm showing you this close up to show you, I want you to see the imperfections of resin print when you look at it closely. So you can see little lines. I like to hit all my stuff with a wash, so that helps bring out the layer lines on FDM. So you can see that this in no way looks perfect, and a resin print of this is way better. But, considering that you're only a few inches away, basically holding this almost up to your eye, doesn't look that bad. I mean, I think it looks pretty good. And I'm not a great painter, obviously. I'm an okay painter at best. And so for an okay painter like me to get these results with FDM prints, I think is pretty impressive. And and anyone who's watching this saying, no, you're a pretty good painter. I actually going to show you something from a good painter coming up. So no one has to be nice to me and say you're a good painter. I'm an average painter. To me, it's paint by numbers, but that's not the point of the video. Is you see the imperfections here. You see that FDM isn't perfect at all. But again, I think most people, if you look at this figure I painted up, you'd be pretty happy to have it on your table, hopefully. It wouldn't detract from your game because it's FDM printed. I mean, it looks to me pretty solid. Again, you're looking at it way closer than you'd see it from on the table. But I do want to show you how FDM isn't as perfect as resin. But again, the point of this video is once you get 2 feet away or 3 feet away, is there any way to really tell? I think this figure on tabletop, if you're not picking it up, I'm not sure you'd be able to tell if it's FDM or resin. So let's just drink this in a little bit from the back. Look at the detail the Ender 3 did pick up. Now, instead of focusing on the flaws, try to focus on how good it looks, actually. So aside from the small flaws, look at everything it captured really nicely. The rope's clear, the hair's clear, the ears came out clear. Now here, again, this is a bad picture because it's an older figure I'd printed up. And I didn't do anything special to this one. So again, since we're super close, you could see little layer lines on this. Right, and I painted it up though, and when I go, I'm going to show it to you at tabletop distance so you can see. You won't be able to tell that this is FDM printed. And by the way, if you're looking at this and thinking, hey, your painting's not so bad, I actually have a picture of this painted by a professional painter, and get ready to have your mind blown and to agree with me that I'm not a good painter, because look at this coming up. So I'm going to digress from the point of this video, because this actually is a resin print anyway that someone painted. But I just have to show you how incredible is this artwork. Like, if you thought mine was okay even, look at this guy painted flowers on that skirt. Look at the edge of the skirt. I don't know what you call the bottom, the ruffle, the rim, I don't know what you call the bottom of that skirt. It's friggin' unbelievable, man. So I know I'm digressing from my video a little bit, but just I have to shout out when I see art like this, which made me basically pick mine up and throw it in the garbage. This is what a real artist can do with a small figure. And if you look back at mine, then look at this, you will no longer think my paint job was decent. Passable for tabletop. I mean, I'm not trying to put myself down terribly. I'm an okay painter, and my stuff does look pretty good on the tabletop. But, holding, look at this thing up close, and I could actually look at this. I won't make you look at it for too much longer. I can almost stare at this all day. I'm a little retarded like that. I'm just amazed at what some human beings can do in such a small space, and what steady hands and eyes they must have. Even under a magnifying glass, I couldn't even come close to doing this. I'm looking at it right now, making this video. I'm still amazed by this damn painting. Incredible artwork. Oh, and this figure, by the way, is from Evocatus Miniatures, and they have a Kickstarter with this coming up called Goldfields, which you should check out. Anyway, back to looking at my crappy paint job. Now, looking at it from tabletop distance, it still doesn't look, his and mine at tabletop, mine still looks like crap. But let's try to forget his beautiful artwork and just look at mine. The dwarf on the left, again, as we know, is resin printed off my Photon, and it is an immaculate print. The one on the right, as we know, is off my Ender 3, and right now, be honest, you can't tell the difference. And this is true tabletop distance, is effectively about anywhere from 2.5 feet, or 2 to 2.5 feet, maybe a little more, but less than 3 feet for sure, and you can't tell. I can't tell. So now let me show you some of the things that my Photon, my resin printer, can't do that my Ender can. So here she is, this at true tabletop distance, all this terrain. Although the bushes would have fit on my Photon, of course, I did them on the Ender anyway, just to have it all be consistent. But the house wouldn't fit, those trees wouldn't fit, the tree canopies wouldn't fit. Those are all off my Ender 3. So just by buying one printer, you can make the figures I've shown you, which at this distance, I think look amazing. And you can make all this terrain as well, though, which also at tabletop distance, again, you pick up the tree canopies, they don't look amazing, they look good. You get an inch away, they still look pretty good, but not perfect, of course. But again, tabletop distance, you throw all this stuff down your table at once, and holistically what it gives you is such a beautiful look. People won't even notice if there are tiny details that are off or didn't print perfectly, because if you paint it half decently, and again, the paint job on everything here is super fast, and I'm making videos on how to do that because I'm not a good painter, but at least I can paint fast. So here it is a little closer. Let's see how it holds up in a view that is now only, say, 1.5 feet away. I'm looking at it. I personally am extremely happy with how it looks. My players, when they see this on the table, actually, since they're seeing it all at once holistically, as I said, they're pretty amazed actually when I put all this stuff down, like, holy crap, it looks great. So I think an Ender 3, since it does everything, if you're only getting one printer, it should be an Ender 3, because your miniatures come out good enough that if you're just using them for D&D, I mean, these miniatures off my Ender 3 still come out as good as some of the things I've gotten from Reaper, in terms of detail and how well they print it out. And some areas might not quite be as good underneath the models. Some other areas where they were supported doesn't come out as clean. But like I said, with a little bit of TLC, the models and like I said, even a half decent paint job, I think what you're looking at is really more than passable on the table. And with an Ender 3, it's so economical to print all this stuff out. So yeah, you pay $200 for the printer. And if you're like me, I paid $60 for upgrades because I wanted the all-metal hot end, which I made a review of. So if you're thinking to get a printer, I highly recommend the metal hot end. It solves a lot of problems, I believe, that the Ender has for other people, which is really important because you want as hassle-free printing as possible. So once you've made the expenditure for the Ender itself and whatever upgrade you want, let's say, yeah, you spent a lot of money, you spent $300. After $300, I get to print all this stuff, and it now costs me, all this terrain right here probably cost me $3 or $4 to print. If I was buying this terrain, it probably would have cost me, $30 or $40 or $50, or I don't know, maybe even more. And then I painted it up, speed painted it basically. And again, you're looking at it. I know if you have a critical eye and you're a painter, you might look at this stuff and say, hey, it doesn't look that good. But I think for most average people, you look at what I've done and you say, hey, I'd be really happy to have this on my tabletop. It looks great. It's really exciting for my players to see stuff like this. Now, you're looking at one little scene. If I put down, 3 other houses, I painted the other 5 trees, and there's a bunch of stuff I haven't painted also. Unfortunately, my paint queue is now, because of my printers, having 2 printers, my paint queue is now infinite, let's be honest. I print stuff way faster than I paint it, but the point is the stuff I have painted, if I slap it all down on the table at once, and you just come in and look at that holistic scene without picking up each piece and examining it, it looks totally amazing. I mean, You don't need a resin printer to have an absolutely gorgeous table. And in fact, I argue, if you only have a resin printer, you'll have nice looking figures, but you can't have this terrain. You have to go buy it somewhere else and spend a lot of money. To me, you might as well 3D print it. So if you're only getting one printer, I'd say definitely an Ender 3 over a resin printer. But again, the point of this video was just comparing figures. And when you compare the figures, you go back and look at it, I think, and let me show you just a couple more examples before we end the video. I think that you'll agree that, the Ender 3, and again, I'm saying it throughout the whole video, does not do resin quality prints. It just doesn't. But close enough that tabletop distance, it makes sense and is worth. So here are two Goblin bombers, and I have two of them because I was testing some different profiles out. But this is, you can't get closer than this. This is high-res camera, 50 megapixels, effectively putting you about a centimeter away from the model. And these models are tiny also. They're smaller than a quarter. So you're seeing a lot of imperfections here, and I wanted to show you like an extreme close-up of imperfections so you can see what they are. So on the left, I did slightly higher layer height, and you can see looks a little bit like a topographical map in some parts. You can actually see the layers pretty clearly. Next one to the right, I have slightly less layer lines. You can see the artifacts and imperfections, and I have not cleaned these up obviously yet. If I do and then paint them, I think aside from the teeth, where the teeth is always the problem, but look how it handled the stitching, the little hand grenades on the chest, the toes. Look at the toes. Considering those toes are infinitesimally small, came out. I was pretty stunned when these came off the printer, actually, how nice they came off. Now let's look at them from just, a more reasonable distance. And this is still going to be a lot closer than tabletop. I'm going to pull the camera back so that we're about a foot away. But before I do that, just, again, look at the detail. The nose is smushed, by the way. That's part of the sculpt. That's just how it looks. So it's, which I think is really funny. It looks great. But look at all the stitching over it. The goggles came out amazing. The detail in this that the Ender can pick up. So here it is from effectively only a foot away. Now look how good they look. Even the messed up teeth don't look that messed up from this distance. And again, that's unpainted, uncleaned up. If I do clean this up, get my X-Acto and scrape those teeth a little bit to shape them, when they don't come out perfect, I kind of shape the teeth by scraping them with my X-Acto. And then when I paint it, I think from more than a foot away, you will not be able to tell that these aren't resin. I mean, look at them right now, just even from this distance, even unpainted, unprimed, uncleaned up, looks pretty good. I mean, now, if you ask me, does it look as good as resin? No. And I'm going to show you a resin version of this print so that you can see exactly what it looks like. But again, just drink these in. They still do look pretty amazing, and this is off my Ender 3. Now, off my Photon, you're going to see that it looks a lot better, of course. And so this guy right in the center of the picture, it's a mirrored version of what I just showed you. So you can see here the teeth. The difference between the resin printer is the teeth printed out perfectly. You can see every little fang is great. But I have to say, the toes, for instance, on my resin prints, didn't come out. If you go back and mouse backwards, the toes on the FDM print came out basically as good, maybe even better, maybe clearer. I think it's pretty incredible to say, but anyway, the resin print's obviously better. If you're looking at it from this distance, the resin print's better. It's going to paint up a little better. But again, from tabletop distance, I really think you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference. I mean, you saw those FDM prints. Aside from a little bit of cleanup to do on the fangs, they were pretty great. And the slight artifacts you saw, like in the hand area and stuff, from a foot away, you can't see those, especially once you paint it up. So for the last thing I'm going to show you, we're looking at a bigger print. Now, obviously, see it's about 70, 80 millimeters tall, which the Photon, the Ender 3 is pretty good at. So where does it struggle? So if you look closely, you'll see the fingers, because they're really long and thin and hanging down, all need some cleanup, which I didn't do yet. Again, this model is, I removed the supports, but I didn't clean it up yet. Generally, it looks pretty great. I think you'll agree. I'm going to show a resin print in a minute so you can compare it, and you'll see the resin print is way better. But again, this is effectively, 8 inches away from your face, so you're going to see all the defects. You move it a foot, 2 feet, 3 feet away, this troll is going to look, it's painted up nice with a little bit of TLC, again, scraping, cleaning. going to look pretty incredible, I think. So now we're going to go to the resin print. Obviously, you see on the resin print, this is way better, way cleaner. But again, if I scrape the other one, clean it up, and I put it right next to this one at 3 feet away, you might be able to tell a slight difference, but you might not. Also, I'm not convinced that you would. And unfortunately, I don't have time to paint them. It's going to take, like I said, my paint queue is almost infinite. But just from these pictures, you should see the quality you can get out of an Ender 3 on your minis versus a Photon, and I would never argue that it's as good. Again, I know I keep harping on the whole video. It's definitely not as good. But for the average person who's using it for D&D or Pathfinder or something like that, I think it's just as good. Now, if you're using it for Warhammer, where painting really counts and your models really count in terms of looks, it's a little tougher, because if people are going to be picking up your models and looking at them, and they are a few inches away, you will notice the difference between the resin and the FDM. But for anyone who's just playing tabletop games, I think you've seen from this video that the Ender 3 can pump out figures that are basically almost as good, and painted up and from a distance, I believe they are as good. So anyway, hope you learned something watching the video. Hope you like it. Please smash the like button. Please subscribe to my channel, and please watch my videos where I teach you how to print in FDM and resin to get these kind of results, because you look at my pictures, you'll see my results are a little better than the average person gets, and I go into ways you can make your prints better so they look more like mine. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon watching some more of my vids. Thanks.